Hotep, Hotep, brothers and sisters, peace, light, life, and love, all that good stuff. So I told you all I was super excited about getting the YouTube page up and going, and so now we're here. This is actually the first video presentation that I'm delivering, and I choose to entitle this discourse, lecture, or presentation, The Alchemy. The alchemy of converting fear into fear. So what are you talking about? Converting fear into fear. And so I came across some information or some literature that gave the acronym for fear as F everything and run. And so I'm saying face everything and recover. So it's fear, but it's a different acronym for fear. So instead of, saying F everything and run, how about saying face everything and recover? And so this is alchemy on a whole nother level. In fact, the term alchemy, as used by alchemists, really had nothing to do with the whole ideal of converting metals or base metals into gold. That whole ideal or concept was a metaphor for improving your character, in layman term, improving your character. So base character meaning corruption, bad morals, bad manners, uncivilized, uncouth behavior, moving around like a beast in human form. There's so many ways you can, size it up. But the bottom line is we're talking about low vibrational energy of frequencies. And so that would be, or that's a metaphor for base metals. And so the alchemists talked about converting base metals into gold. The first alchemist, believe it or not, and we don't call him an alchemist, he's called the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. He makes mention of the ideal of converting base metals into gold in the New Testament. And I thought that was real interesting when I read it. And it's been a while since I've read it, but I know it's there. It's in the writings of Paul, wherein Paul gives instructions to his followers, for lack of a better expression, to convert base metals into gold. Giving you another example of how that expression is a metaphor. It's not to be interpreted on face value. And so it's equally true in this particular presentation that we're not talking about converting real metals, base metals into gold. We're not talking about converting lead or silver or copper into gold. We're talking about converting bad energy into good energy, So let's go there. We all too familiar with the whole concept. I mean, like, not just familiar, but many of us should have a boatload of experience of living in fear. Living in fear meaning, again, saying F everything and running. So our whole life has been spent, for the most part, running from something, for some reason. And as they would say, you can run, but you cannot hide. Hide from who? Hide from what? Hide from yourself. Because that's who we're running from at the end of the day when we say F everything and run. We're running from ourselves. And so let us be alchemists at this point and learn how to convert base metals into gold, philosophically speaking, or fear into fear. And fear in this particular context is facing everything and recovering. So an operative meaning for the term recovery is an active change in your ideals and your attitudes. So recovery is an inside job. It's an inside job. No matter how you dress up the outside, if your outside don't reflect or match your inside, it's just a matter of time that what doesn't come out of the wash will come out of the rinse. And so this change must start from within ourselves. There's a verse in the Holy Quran that says that Allah does not change a condition of a people until they first change what is within themselves. There's another verse in the Bible that talks about, be ye renewed by the transforming of your thinking. Okay, that's a para. I'm just paraphrasing, but it doesn't say it in those exact words. But that's exactly what it's alluding to. Is that again, this true change that many of us say we are seeking must take place within. In fact, the whole transformative process has to start from within and then make its way, outward. And so facing everything and recovering. And so we got a good operative definition of the word recovery, and recovery is an active change in ideals and attitudes. But what are we recovering from? Well, I'm about to go there. We recovering from the slave mentality. I'm 45 years old. I've been on this earth for a minute now, okay? And it just dawned on me how the slave mentality actually contribute to 99.9% of our problems. You may say, well, slave mentality, I'm not a slave and my people were never slaves. And so we'll think that that whole concept only apply to descendants of slaves. Although it does mean that, okay, so we're gonna deal with that factor too. But if you are caught up in what they call in modern day terms, the matrix, it is equally true that you suffer from the slave mentality as well. Okay? The key, let me put it this way, of changing that slave mentality is learning how to think instead of what to think. I don't think I could come up with a better analogy, than the one that I just got through delivering. And so the goal is to teach a person how to think instead of what to think. The whole slave mentality paradigm is based on mental programming. Mental programming. And this program obviously is done through entertainment, through movies, through music, and the like, okay? And so many of us from day one have been, and I forget this term, and hopefully it'll come back to me, conditioned, okay? They call it observational learning and vicarious conditioning. These are two terms that I learned in my psychology course. And psychology is my major, and I did real good. I think the worst grade that I made in my psychology courses was a C, maybe a C, probably a B. And so psychology is my thing. And so those terms, really meant a lot to me, especially when, the textbooks, the course books gives you an operational definition of the various terms. And as a student, it's your responsibility to understand these terms so that when you do take a quiz or an exam, you can pass that exam because you understand the terminology of whatever particular subject matter it may be that you're studying. And in this particular case, the subject matter or the course was on psychology. And so there are two terms that come to me when I think about this programming, this conditioning that many of us have been exposed to nearly all of our lives. And those two terms are observational learning and vicarious conditioning. I was really blown away with these two particular terms, and actually my first essay or term paper, I use the terms vicarious conditioning and observational learning because I'm an ex-gang member. And I noticed that everybody is really saying the same thing, but they just using a different choice of words. And so I realized that most of the stuff that's mentioned in these course books, my psychology course book in particular, are things that I'm already adept. I mean adept, not just versed in, not just for me. I'm talking about I'm adept because I come from the hood. The only difference was the language of psychology was different from the language of the hood. And I was already in the field of mentoring young men who came from the concrete jungles of America like myself, who was caught up in the gang mentality / slave mentality, because I don't think there's a difference between the gang mentality and the slave mentality, just a different, expression, but meaning the same thing. And so I noticed that, we would say things like insane to the brain or loco and things that, and these are pretty much the same thing that these operational definitions of these psychological terms was given in the glossary and all that type of stuff. I'm like, I'm feeling this now, I'm getting into this now. And so I looked up vicarious conditioning, and the image or the picture that the textbook, and I still have this textbook, by the way, the image that it gave was a young person, a young child, sitting in front of his TV, locked and loaded. So whatever program this child was looking at, this program had the undivided attention of the young person. And the ideal was that at a very early age, we are being vicariously conditioned to think, feel, and act a certain way unconsciously, just by being exposed to these various programs. And I said, well, hell, that put me in the shoes of myself watching the movie Colors. Because I watched this movie 1,000 times. So if I watched this movie 1,000 times, obviously I liked the movie, right? But it was more to it than that. And what I discovered, now that I'm out of that circle of things, vicious cycle of things, I discovered in retrospect that by watching this movie Colors over and over again, I was being vicariously conditioned to think, feel, and act like a hardcore gang member. So in the beginning, of course, I was just at the wannabe stage like many of us, but after practice for so long, you become the real thing. And it's funny to understand where all of it started from, right? And then you have another one which is similar to vicarious conditioning, and that's observational learning. And observational learning is when you step up off the porch and now you see the action going on around you by the quote-unquote big homies or the OGs, and you start modeling yourself and emulating and imitating these guys. I say, wow. Then you got classical conditioning and operant conditioning and all that good stuff. So this is not a psychology course, but then again, it is a psychology course because everything is mental. The universe is mental. Fear is a mental thing before it becomes an emotional thing, before it becomes a behavioral thing. And so it's our responsibility to convert fear into fear. So instead of saying F everything and run, let us start saying face everything and recover. Recover from what? For the last time, the slave mentality. Peace.